Let's talk about Batman versus Superman. Now, when I sit down to watch a movie, typically I'll pick movies from a wide selection of, say, directors that I know or admire. But Batman vs. Superman is interesting because it's a film that has been on my list for a really long time. Since it came out, I've always been a huge Batman fan. Batman, to me, was always the real superhero. I always found Superman to be a really boring character because he's basically God, and that's just not really interesting. And that's kind of the greatness of Batman versus Superman and the failure of Batman versus Superman. Now, to clarify before I really get into kind of the details that is Batman versus Superman, I want to say that I'm talking about the Ultimate Edition. I haven't seen the original cut. I know they cut out a bunch of stuff, and I know that the Ultimate Edition is more of Zack Snyder's vision. I don't know what the original looks like. I've heard a lot of people talk about it. I remember when it came out, I remember people hating it, I remember people criticizing it. And while I'm not really sure what's new and what's not, I can see what was probably cut out, and I can see the justification from Warner Brothers' position. Because let's be honest, it's a 3 hour film, and I don't know why I keep putting myself through this, hating 3 hour films, and yet the last three films I've watched have been 2.5 to 3 hours long. I don't know why I keep torturing myself with this. Hopefully tomorrow I'll watch a shorter film. I thought about watching Justice League, but after watching two 3 hour films in a row, I think I need a break from 3 hour and 4 hour films. It's so long, and I understand why Warner Brothers wanted to cut it out. But as I was watching the film, I was struggling to figure out what it would be like. What exactly was new footage or footage that wasn't in the original cut? Because it doesn't seem like there's a lot there that you could really cut and it would still make sense. And I don't think that's so much a problem of, yes, it needs to be a 3 hour film. I still think it should have been shorter. I think it could have been a much tighter film at an hour and a half, 2 hours. I think it's more a complication of the convoluted story that is Batman versus Superman. Now, everything that goes on with Lex Luthor, I actually think is really interesting. And if I'm being completely honest, I can see Lex Luthor being the hero of the film. I, unlike most of the people who read comic books or watch comic book movies, don't like Superman. I first of all think that he is a boring character. I think he is very American in kind of all of the worst of ways. And what's strange about this film is because Zack Snyder kind of paints himself as a sort of Superman, and at least I think he does, and the way he dresses and acts, it's very Zack Snyder-esque. Although it's interesting that Batman also, like if you look at how Zack Snyder dressed, it's also very similar to how Batman dresses. I don't know which one came first, but I think that Zack Snyder does see himself in these superheroes, specifically Superman, which is why he made the Superman film before he went on to make these films. And as a character, I just don't find him all that interesting. Obviously, Zack Snyder thinks that Superman is the hero of every film, but when we talk about Lex Luthor and Batman for most of the film see Superman as the villain, and honestly, Superman as the villain is a much more interesting story. And if I'm being honest, Lex Luthor has a lot of good points to make. I remember reading a review for the film I Care a Lot, which is an awful film. But as I was reading reviews, I recognized that one of my favorite reviews said, Rosamund Pike actually makes a lot of good points, and I don't necessarily agree with her, although there are some boomers that maybe I'm not a huge fan of. But I do really like kind of the point being made with kind of Lex Luthor, which is Lex Luthor makes a lot of really good points. Just like I don't really understand why people sided with Captain America in the Marvel movies, I don't understand why people side with Superman other than that's this national Americanism, this superiority of a country, this belief of freedom. But people like Captain America, people like Superman, they don't abide by the laws, they don't abide by the rules. And yes, they seem to be good people, but at any moment they can become bad. At any moment they can murder people. There's kind of that opening scene where Superman saves Lois, And yeah, he didn't kill all those other people, but he definitely killed that one guy, and he's definitely caused a lot of destruction. I kind of think that whole like thing Lex Luthor does by like killing all those people and having Superman have to come to trial for that is kind of pointless. I think what would have been a much more interesting story is, hey, thousands of people had died because of this kind of Superman attack, and Marvel actually kind of sort of did this with what the Sokovia trials and Captain America: Civil War. Although I think the Russo brothers kind of got it wrong on who was really on the right side of history. It was very clearly Captain America. Civil War is very a Captain America kind of freedom American kind of movie, which honestly should have been more of an Iron Man movie because it really was more of his story, more of his movie. And I think he was right, which is that look, these people have superpowers, and maybe Superman's a good person, maybe Captain America is a good person, but obviously, and they know for a fact that Superman is the only one, and a lot of people died because of Superman. While watching this film, I couldn't help but think, did Zack Snyder basically just watch The Incredibles and then just kind of morph it into this film? Because there are a lot of similarities, and I think of Incredibles 2, which I know came after Batman vs. Superman, but it kind of deals, I think Incredibles 2 deals in a better way than this film did with the whole idea of what it means to be a superhero and how superheroes actually exist in the world. And there's this incredible scene in Incredibles 2 where they are Mr. Incredible and Mrs. Incredible are sitting. I can't remember if they're sitting like in an interrogation room or if they're sitting in a car, what have you. And like the officers, the CIA, whatever government official, it's kind of vague who they are, says, you know, why did you go out after the mole man or whatever his name is? And he said, oh, we were going to save lives. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And they go, no, no, no. Did you get the money? No. Did you stop the mole person? Well, no, we didn't do that either. And the government points out, look, a lot of people died because of you. The insurance would have covered all of the money lost, and you didn't even capture the bad guy. Superheroes are a thing in the past, and it goes back to the original Incredibles where they banned superheroes. That actually makes a lot more sense in the world. It makes a lot more sense that superheroes would be banned from the world. And Superman has this really hypocritical, I think, view of the world, which is he thinks that he can be a superhero, but when Batman does the same thing, and I'm not saying Batman in this universe is necessarily the best person, maybe branding people isn't the greatest idea in the world, but Superman thinks that he can do it, but no one else can. If he does it, that's fine. If someone else does it, they're the bad guy, they're the villain. And that really bothers me. And I think Henry Cavill gives an incredible performance, especially when he's in that kind of Clark Kent character. I don't think he's as good as, say, the Superman in the Richard Donner films and eventually Richard Lester films. But I do think he gives two really incredible performances. I think as a character, he's kind of irritating and hypocritical. You know, Clark Kent slash Superman, he can go and save the world and do whatever he wants because he thinks it's right. But if Batman does the same thing, suddenly Batman's a villain. That's kind of hypocritical, and that's not criticism of the film. I think the film kind of looks into that, but Zack Snyder's big problem, and I think the big problem with the film is it's even though you have characters like Lex Luthor who are making some very good points, they still make the good versus evil way too black and white. And maybe Justice League doesn't do this. Maybe Justice League kind of works more in the grays. And I think one of the reasons I like the Joker is of all the superhero movies, I guess, although is Joker really a superhero movie? That's kind of hard to say. But of all the movies within the genre, although I would say that's on kind of the fringes of the genre, it's probably my favorite film. And I think why I like it so much about the other films is, first of all, your protagonist is this really complicated person that you want to empathize with, even though they commit some really heinous and evil acts. Secondly, it shows that good versus evil isn't how the world exists. There isn't this dichotomy of good guys over here and bad guys over here. It's really complicated and mixed. And while Zack Snyder kind of looks into that a little bit, he cares way too much about Superman. He cares way too much about Superman being the good guy, about perceiving him as the good guy. And I think the film would actually be more interesting if we took out all the stuff where we're following Superman. If we only had Batman's perspective. And that could cut out a good 30 to 45 minutes of the film. And by only showing Batman's perspective, you go to empathize with Batman a lot more. You kind of turn to his side. The problem with the way the film is built now is that Batman's not really a good guy or a bad guy. You don't know how to feel about him. You kind of feel bad for him. And I think Ben Affleck, even though some people don't like his Batman, I think, although I don't think it's gonna be as good as Rob Pat's Batman, I think it's my favorite version of Batman. I think he just really gives off that kind of really sad guy who dresses up as a bat at night and kills people. Like he just feels and looks sort of disheveled, and I really enjoy that about Ben Affleck's Batman. Like he looks like a guy down on his luck, and I think it really works. And just the whole look that Zack Snyder has for that Batman is one of my favorite Batman looks. But Zack Snyder clearly doesn't actually care about Batman that much. I think if you had told the whole story from Batman's perspective and only Batman's perspective, you would go to love that character and you would understand how he feels, even though they kind of have this smart moment at the beginning. I was kind of hoping the film would kind of work in this way, where you see Batman running, Superman's basically killing all of these people, and Batman runs and saves as many people as he can. Although I think it's a little ridiculous at the beginning of the film. Bruce Wayne, Ben Affleck, Batman, whatever you want to call him, calls the head of his like corporation. He says, "Get everyone out of there," and he's like, and the guy there's like, "Okay, Bruce Wayne." Which is weird because you would think like, I don't know, if I was like the head of the company or even low on the company and I saw two flying men flying through buildings, murdering people, I would have already left. I would have quit hours ago. I would definitely still not be there. And yet up to that moment, they're like all just standing there, just doing their job, which either like the Bruce Wayne company is just like the best company in the world to work for, or they are somehow like, I don't know, brainwashed or something. It's really fascinating. And I think that moment's really silly. And there's a lot of silly moments like that, that if you had cut, I think it would have made for a better film. I think Zack Snyder's big problem sort of in the direction of James Cameron, although in a very different way, is he wants to try to explain things that are happening. And I understand, and honestly, there was probably complaints from Warner Brothers and the producers that people won't understand this film because there are a lot of parts of this film that take a lot of thinking and sitting around and kind of mulling over. So I understand why they have those kind of expositional moments. And I'm not really criticizing those expositional moments that much because they don't come very often, and I understand the necessity of them. But that moment, you understand who Batman is, you understand why he doesn't like Superman, and you empathize with him at that moment. Because, yeah, all of these people are dying, and they're dying because Superman's not really a great person. Superman's the reason all those other people got there. And instead of having that fight, I don't know, in space or literally anywhere in the world, could have gone to like the Sahara Desert, Antarctica, one of these many places where there are bunches of people. He's like, no, let's have it here in this populated city, which kind of proves that Superman, again, isn't that great of a guy. But Zack Snyder is so obsessed with his version of Superman that he can't see beyond it, and he always kind of points Batman as the bad guy. And that's kind of one of the big problems of the film is it's who exactly is the protagonist? Coming into the film, I thought this was going to be more of a Batman film because they didn't have a Batman film before this, which I think is another flaw. I think they should have had a film before this about Batman before, just to establish who this Batman was. Even though, yes, we have many other versions of Batman, I think he needed his own standalone film before you brought him in with Superman. Though you could argue, well, how he defines himself as Batman is clearly regulated by Superman, but he's already been Batman for like 20 years, well before Superman kind of came to Metropolis. So I don't really agree with that assumption. I know people get mad at this Batman. It's like, oh, well, this Batman kills and shoot guns, but let's be completely honest. If you're Batman, right, if you are a multi-billionaire and you're taking down criminals, there's no way you don't have a gun. Like, I enjoy the Christopher Nolan Batman films, and I would say they're the probably truest to the comic books in a lot of ways, even though they take a lot of kind of realistic takes on it. But the idea that Batman wouldn't have a gun is just silly. I understand the comic books, he almost never has a gun, but he still has all of those like different gadgets, and you're telling me that when he goes up against 20 people with guns, he's not gonna have a gun? No way. That Batman definitely has a gun. And the idea of him not killing people, it's just unrealistic and silly. And I know they're superhero movies, but I'm not really bothered by the idea of Batman killing people. So when I talk about the problems with Batman in this movie, it's actually not in a lot of ways his portrayal of Batman. I think Snyder gets Batman right in a way that a lot of films and comic books don't get him right. Yes, it might not be necessarily original to what was originally intended for the film, but it's more if Batman was actually a character, how would this actually work? And clearly, Zack Snyder has spent a lot of time thinking how these people would exist in the world, and he has built a metropolis. I think of kind of some shots towards the end after Superman's dead, and there's like these slow panning shots of Metropolis. And at that point, I realized that there's a lot missing, and I'm kind of disappointed that they had those shots at the end because even though we're almost 3 hours into this film, you never really get established where Metropolis is or what Metropolis is like. Apparently, it's super close to like DC because they're just everyone's constantly going to DC to see these senators. So I'm not really sure like where the geography is, but it's not just that. I don't really understand what the city's like itself. One thing I love about the Nolan Batman series is you have a very real sense of what the city, right, of what this type of Gotham is like and what it looks like. Where with these films, there are so many scenes that are in like dark alleys or in buildings that you really don't get a sense of what the city is like. And while you don't necessarily need a giant sense of what a city is like for every film, I think it would add value for a film like this because the whole film does take place in these cities. And after the first scene, or after the scene, it's 18 months later, which I think is a really interesting choice, but I think it's the wrong choice. I think instead of going 18 months later, I think Zack Snyder kind of misses the most important stuff, which is after that incident is where all of the political drama would be. And you see in the film, it's interesting that Zack Snyder often has the conservatives be anti-Superman. But let's be honest, if Superman lived in the world, and I'm not criticizing conservatives or liberals, conservatives would be very pro Superman, right? He's basically a standing army who fights for the American government. The conservatives would be all about Superman, just like they'd be all about Captain America, even though in these Marvel and DC movies we kind of paint superheroes as these liberal characters. The Captain Americas and the Supermans of the world are actually incredibly conservative in a lot of ways. And that's not criticism. It's just, if you're going to show, like, and he does this a lot, he shows a lot of uh, conservative tacos talking shit about Superman, which is, they wouldn't be doing that. They would love Superman because here's a guy who will kill people and murder people for the sake of American government and to save Lois Lane, which clearly shows his intentions. And the thing with Lois Lane, I can't remember. It's been a while since Superman, the last Superman movie. I don't think he reveals himself in that movie, so I guess it just kind of happened somewhere in between. And I'm kind of okay with Lois Lane knowing who Superman just Clark Kent is. I wish, and I know I earlier criticized the idea of kind of having a bunch of exposition in the film, but I really want to know, how do people not know Clark Kent is Superman? Like, I know in the comic books they explain like he'll move his face like super fast when he's Clark Kent or when he's Superman. And if you just give me like one line like that, fine. It's just I need something. I need a reason to not recognize these two people because they're so similar. And Superman, and it's not like it's a Superman where he's just like in a metropolis and he's just flying around. Like he's on TV, he's on cameras. How do people not know he's Clark Kent? It bothers me a bit, and it's an easy explanation. But I guess when you have a 3 hour film, maybe that was cut out, or maybe it just wasn't something that was interesting at the time. But I do think that the film kind of misses the most interesting part, which is rebuilding Metropolis. After the destruction, I think that's where the real politics come in, right? That would be really interesting if you have LexCorp come in and say, hey, we're going to give a bunch of money to kind of rebuild Metropolis and turn Superman into a bad guy. And the way Lex Luthor kind of works, honestly, I wish they would have Zack Snyder would have cut out all the stuff with Darkseid. And I know it kind of goes into Steppenwolf and what happens in Justice League, but it's just not that interesting. I think the The stuff between Batman versus Superman is really interesting. I think the way Lex Luthor kind of plays the two against each other, like I think the first half of the film has a lot of great stuff in it, and that's kind of where you see Lex Luthor at his best, kind of using his mental capacity and using his resources to kind of bat these two against each other. And then when it comes to Martha, I don't know how we don't talk about that scene. How do you not talk about the Martha scene? I don't think it's as bad as people said it was. I remember like hearing tons about it for years, literally, since it came out. And so 5 years I've been hearing about the Martha scene. And so I had this really kind of bad taste in my mouth of what it would be. When I actually saw it, it wasn't as bad. I understand like what Zack Snyder was trying to go for with it, which is like he was recognizing Superman's humanity and recognizing at this moment that Superman was a man and not a god, and that not only could he beat, not only could he bleed, but that he wasn't any different than him. But the fact that it all hinges on them having the same name for mother, I think you could have had that moment in a different way. And I think Zack Snyder kind of wrote himself into a corner, or if he didn't, I believe he was a writer on it, but there may have been other writers on it. But they wrote them, whoever wrote it, wrote themselves in a corner with like, how does Batman in this moment recognize Superman's humanity? And I think that conversation could have merely gone, look, my mother is trapped. Although, how can Superman not find her? Like, why not just put her in like a lead container? Like, you already did the lead thing with the chair. Why not do it there? Just so like Superman can't just fly away and find her, because he could. And maybe he's blinded by rage or blah 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 blah. But they're just little like plot holes that just there's no reason that they need to exist. Just like the Martha thing. I honestly think it's an easy fix. At that moment, he has the kryptonite stick in his hand or spear, whatever it is. And he says, something to the effect of, I'm going to kill you, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, please, my mother, blah, blah, blah. And he basically tells, his mother's dying. And, you can still cut to that flashback of Bruce Wayne as a kid seeing his mother die. And you don't have to use the Martha thing. It's just a silly kind of lazy, honestly, cop out that really doesn't add anything to the story. I don't think it takes as much away as people say it does. I think in the moment, you're kind of willing to buy it. But I think, you want to talk about cutting that film, let's end it there. End with Batman versus, Batman and Superman coming. I mean, the movie's called Batman versus Superman. That's really what people want to see, and that's the interesting part. Everything after that is just uninteresting. I think Wonder Woman is a very underutilized character in this film, and you only see a little bit of her, which is really disappointing. And I know it came out before Wonder Woman, which is kind of weird. I'm not really sure why they did it that way, but they did. I would have been much more interested to see much more with Wonder Woman. I think her interaction is much more interesting than, say, any of the stuff with the guy in the wheelchair. Like, his story is just not really that interesting. I get like Lex Luthor's kind of like coming, to get him, but that could honestly just be like a 5-minute story. It doesn't need to be as long and drawn out as it really is. And maybe I think the way to honestly do this is Wonder Woman would be the sort of in between Batman and Superman, right? She would be the one that would stop the fight. It wouldn't be Batman, it wouldn't be Superman, it'd be her. And then you can just cut out all the stuff with Darkseid, because that stuff just really, it isn't interesting. And I think this is the problem with, and I honestly can't, other than the Joker, I cannot think of a single superhero movie. Maybe Spider-Man Homecoming, but I really can't think of maybe Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie. But so many superhero movies, especially I would say of the modern genre, the modern superhero, once we get the Marvel as it is today, the third act always fails. And I think in this film, the third act also fails. I think the fight between Superman and Batman is pretty cool. I think there is this fundamental problem, which I was wondering when I should talk about it. I guess now is as good a time as any to talk about the idea of the God complex. And it's not the God complex you're thinking of. It's this thing that happens in movies all of the time. And I think it's one of the most challenging ways it's complicated is in these Superman-like heroes. basically, the way I think of this sort of film god complex, and I guess I need to come up with a better name for it. But the idea for the complex is that if you have a character that is all powerful, that basically cannot be beaten, how does their conflict? How is he conflicted with the world? And yes, kryptonite is his like right his whatever weakness or what have you. But outside of kryptonite, he's kind of just this all-powerful character, and it makes him much less interesting as a character, which is weird why Zack Snyder's so interested in Superman as a character, and why I've never been interested in Superman as a character. Because he's just perfect, and that perfect isn't interesting. Perfect characters are interesting. We want characters that are flawed, that are conflicted, that are human in a certain sense. And Superman's perfect, and in that, at the beginning of the really until Batman shoots the thing full of kryptonite, Superman is like just this all-powerful being, and like there's the sound thing, and then like the guns, which is just like, what's the point? Like it's just boring, and I love the idea of like having those kind of traps. But if you were Batman, you'd shoot him with kryptonite first, and then do all of those other things. Like those would be second or third. Why he doesn't do that first doesn't really make any sense. And the shooting thing, like clearly Batman had, and I get like Batman's kind of taunting him, and I think like not killing him immediately, I'll buy that because Batman kind of wants revenge, and he seems like one of those characters, especially in this universe, which I think they create well, which is that Batman's just this brutal guy who will just torture people to death, and I clearly see that he wants to torture Superman. So I'll buy that, but there's no way he doesn't immediately hit Batman with, or Superman with the kryptonite. It just doesn't really make any sense that he would go any other way. And the fact that there's kind of that toying at the beginning once again makes Superman this really boring character. And then there's the final scene, which I don't know how to not talk about the final scene. I knew what this final scene was. I knew how the film ended because I'd heard people complain a lot about it. I understand they want to kill Superman. Fine. Kill Superman. I think the story would be a lot more interesting if it was Batman that killed Superman. Like, let's take Darkseid out of the picture. If Batman kills Superman and then spends, instead of the last 30 minutes being like Batman being like, oh, Superman was a really great guy, Batman kind of coming to terms with what he has done, I think that'd be a much more interesting film. And you could still take out the stuff with Darkseid, and Lex Luthor is just caught, right? Batman saves her and then, comes back. Or I guess that does complicate, how do you save Martha? Which maybe you have to kill her, or if she does survive, right, that could be kind of Batman's, like I said, perhaps the beginning of the third act, instead of being Batman versus Superman come together, Batman kills Superman, and he realizes Superman's humanity and kind of comes to terms with that by saving Superman's mother. I think that would have made for a much more interesting film. I wish, now that I'm thinking about it, I wish it could have been on the ground floor, kind of sitting next to Zack Snyder and pitching these ideas to them. I think it would have made for a more interesting film, and you could just ignore Darkseid entirely because he's this really big, boring character that's, when you fight him, it's just like these two all-powerful beings. The hits don't really feel, they don't really hit. And I'll say that kind of the same thing happens when Batman and Superman are fighting. Like, it just feels bouncy, right? Not only that the physics of the world don't work, but whenever Batman is fighting anyone that isn't Superman, and even when he's fighting Superman, it just doesn't seem hard. Like when Batman breaks into save Martha, which I think is a kind of cool scene, there's no point where Batman is down. Like, he gets like a little bit stabbed and that's it. It's just he's so much more powerful than everyone else in the room that it's uninteresting. You want to see him struggle, especially here at the end of the film. Like, at the beginning of the film, yes, you can show him as this badass, all-powerful kind of super hero in a certain sense. But you also want to see him struggle. You want conflict, and he doesn't struggle. It's just him against 20 men. He just kills all of them. Like, the guy has a gun and points out the bad. It's kind of like shoots 3 times, and it doesn't even affect Bruce Wayne, Batman, Ben Affleck, whatever you want to call him. And that's really disappointing because you, as a viewer, you want to be gripped by it. And the way you're gripped by it is you have to feel like Batman could lose. And at no point does it ever feel like Batman could lose. At no point does it feel like Superman can lose. And when Superman takes the spear and kills them, I mean, if you keep Darkseid in, why doesn't Wonder Woman do it? Why doesn't Batman do it? Why doesn't literally anyone else do it? No real reason. Also, Batman shoots the kryptonite bomb or whatever at Darkseid. Why doesn't he do that sooner? Definitely could have done that a lot sooner and would have been much more helpful. But like I said, I don't think Darkseid is an interesting character and adds anything. You could still have everything else and just take out all the stuff with Darkseid. You want to talk about cutting some of that film? You take out the stuff with Darkseid, you cut out like 45 minutes of the film. Now it's like a 2-hour, 15-minute film. Much more enjoyable film, much tighter film, much more interesting film, and you have now the burden of Batman killing Superman. And now Justice League, even though I know this film, although this film still kind of struggles with it, I believe, still haven't seen it yet, going to see it soon. Not the 2017 version, never watched that, but the Zack Snyder version, which I will watch. I know it kind of struggles with like Superman's death, especially from Batman's perspective, I hope. But if Batman kills Superman, and perhaps Wonder Woman kind of gets that relatedly, or like it's Wonder Woman and Superman against Batman, although maybe that doesn't work out. Maybe you just kind of leave Wonder Woman out of the film. I'm not really sure, or she's not in that fighting scene, which she isn't anyways. Then he has to deal with it in a much more serious way, and the reason he gets Justice League together makes a lot more sense, because now it's guilt, right? Because of the Justice League, he's the only human, and now he feels like he needs to build this team because he failed, because he killed Superman. I'm disappointed that they didn't go that route. If Batman versus Superman is ever made again, like if I ever get the chance, say, 30 years from now, to remake Batman versus Superman, that would be my big difference. I think it fails to understand the complexities of both Superman and Batman as characters. It's way too obsessed with the spectacle of Superman and just the greatness of him to see that Lex Luthor's kind of right. He makes a lot of good points. Yes, Lex Luthor's absolutely insane and is a terrible person. But Superman should be feared, and the fact that Zack Snyder as a director can't recognize that kind of ruins the film. So out of 10 thumbs, I guess. I don't know how many thumbs. Out of 10 thumbs, I give it 6. It's definitely better than the second Terminator movie. It's not better than the first Terminator movie. I'll say that Zack Snyder, if nothing else, his films just look very visually interesting, even though they're often pretty boring and have a lot of problems. Like I said, I did enjoy it. I will say it felt like a short 3 hours, even though it was 3 hours, which we prefer it not to be. I will watch Justice League soon. It probably will not be today or tomorrow or this week, but I'll watch it soon just so I can kind of wrap up, and I'll have seen all of the DC movies by that point, except Wonder Woman 84, which who knows if I'll ever get to that. But I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad I finally got to be part of the experience. In the same way I'm glad I watched the Terminator movies. I'm just frustrated in a way I'm not with the Terminator movies, because the Terminator movies, I don't really care. Where these movies, like, they're taking characters I really actually like. Well, mostly just Batman, although I think Wonder Woman's an interesting character too. Superman, I don't think has ever been an interesting character, and I have yet to see a Superman film that I've actually found any enjoyment in, or seen him in any portrayal where he's an interesting character. But I'm sure that character exists. And so it's more disappointing because there's so much potential, and if they had done these kind of structural changes, I think it would have made for a much better film. So here's to hoping that Justice League is better.